1987 Star Wars parody Spaceballs begins with one of the funniest scenes I've ever watched unfold, and I think a lot of people would agree with me. Like all Star Wars movies, it begins with the vast emptiness of space, but a large spaceship of some sort takes over the screen. In the actual Star Wars movies, this is used to show the incredible strength of the Empire. In Spaceballs, well, this is used to achieve a much different effect. The low brass and strings strike, sinister, brooding, with large pauses between each chord. The ship rolls past, and it rolls past, and it rolls past. This continues for 1 minute and 42 seconds, which is a really long time to watch a spaceship lazily fly across a screen. It's also absolutely hysterical. In fact, when my brother and I watched this scene, we couldn't stop laughing, even after the spaceship finished moving. But what exactly makes it so funny? Well, first off, it's a blatant exaggeration of the way Star Wars opens, as I've already alluded to. For a parody of Star Wars to begin in such a manner makes sense. Second, well, it's the music. The music seems impatient, like it's echoing our own disbelief that the ship just keeps going. The repetition of the same chords mimics the monotony of watching the spaceship. Another element is that most movies open with some sort of action, with something exciting happening. Instead, Spaceballs opens with pure boredom. The unity of Spaceballs' elements, from the music to the spaceship to the parodying of the source material, all align to make something genuinely funny. And what should be boredom becomes funny because we weren't expecting something so boring. It's great, and it's also a wonderful example of one of the cornerstones of comedy. Comedy almost always has to defy our expectations in some way, which can be really difficult, at least when it comes to a long-running television series.
Now the story of a wealthy family who lost everything, and the one son who had no choice but to keep them all together.
One show that does an amazing job of this is Arrested Development. Instead of the one-off, cutaway gags most television comedies rely on, Arrested Development utilizes the audience's memory of previous events and happenings, although it does also have some of the funniest cutaway gags I've ever seen. Some jokes in the show are repeated seemingly countless times, and they're only funnier because of it. Minor characters reappear at the most odd moments, and major characters make the most dumbfounding decisions, which land them in the strange and unbelievable situations the show is known for. All while the narrator describes most happenings with a certain dry acceptance of the events. The show is complete absurdity caused by moronic characters' moronic actions, and it's a delight to watch, because the show rarely slows down. It's always building on itself, and even when it enters another season, it will keep calling back to moments from 20 or 30 episodes earlier. This may lead us to think that repetition is simply funny in and of itself, but that wouldn't be quite right.
Penny. Penny. Penny.
Many other shows, such as The Big Bang Theory, have relied on repeated, recycled jokes. One of the biggest differences between that show and Arrested Development, however, is that Arrested Development repeats jokes in a variety of different and gradually more unbelievable situations and settings. We'll encounter a moment where we think there's no way that a previous gag could return, and then it somehow does in a relatively natural way. The Big Bang Theory, meanwhile, just keeps doing the same things over and over, because watching nerdy guys with strange dysfunctional relationships will always be funny, right? Right?
Our whole universe.
Really though, despite my personal disdain for The Big Bang Theory, plenty of people enjoy the show. I mean, it's got a whole lot of seasons, and the actors are getting paid a whole lot of money, and it wrangles in a whole lot of viewers, so clearly a lot of people enjoy it. Which I guess I can deal with, even if I don't like it, since, like all art, comedy is subjective. And that really is what makes it so hard to make. However, what I would say is that comedy is a bit more difficult than other genres of entertainment, in that it isn't really taken seriously. Considering its main purpose is to make us laugh, this makes some sense, but comedy is serious business and takes serious work. Good comedy is incredibly hard to make and takes an incredible amount of thought. There's a tendency for people to say something is just funny, or that someone is just funny, and that mentality carries over to television as well.
Creed is eating an apple. I found a potato.
Hey, Creed.
Hey. Hello.
Let's take The Office for an example of how complex comedy can really get. The American and British versions of it have vastly different tones, types of humor, and characterization. There is, after all, a fairly large divide between American and British humor, with the former being concerned with fast gags and the latter being more concerned with dry, awkward humor and a sense of tone. Or at least that's how I, as a Canadian, perceive it, but I could be totally wrong. That cultural divide, however, is undeniable even if I'm pinpointing the wrong things. And that divide with humor is another element that makes comedy so difficult to make, but I may be getting a bit off track. Regardless of the differences between versions, the mockumentary format is simple but brilliant. It makes the characters feel more real, which also allows for individual moments with each of them, wherein we get a greater understanding of their character. These individual moments are what make Creed one of the single funniest characters ever created, and where all of the characters' personalities are allowed to shine. However, this also puts an increased emphasis on character. If any of these characters aren't funny enough, aren't interesting enough to hold our interest for one of their usually short interviews, the entire the entire series pacing may be thrown out of whack. It's a simple premise that requires a shocking amount of deftness to properly handle. Some, but not many, may argue that this is where The Office fails because if you don't find Michael Scott funny, the show isn't going to be for you. The laughter we derive from watching his idiocy is staked on us finding his stupidity funny and not frustrating. Personally, I find it hilarious, but I know a number of people who find it more aggravating than anything else, which would certainly upset Michael a whole lot. So once again, comedy is subjective. Most may agree that The Office succeeds in balancing the frustrating and hilarious, but not all do. The unity of its elements, through the interviews, the characters, and the strategic use of its bland setting, create an entertaining show. So comedy, once again, is based off of unity, off of parts coming together from the camera work to the framing to the music to the characterization. One could argue that all film, however, is about the unity of these elements, but I find it even more important when I'm watching comedy. To exemplify this, I'm going to use an anime called Konosuba, which has had 2 seasons so far. It follows a teenage boy named Kazuma who dies from the shock of almost getting hit by a tractor and is sent to a fantasy world after his death. The show is as ridiculous as the premise makes it sound, and it's frequently hilarious. However, from the first to second season, the show underwent a major aesthetic rehaul, one that many people were confused about and called childish. But watching the show, it quickly became apparent why this change was made. In the first season, there was nothing particularly unique about the style of the show. What I mean is that if I compared it to a number of different 2D animated shows, I honestly wouldn't have found anything particularly different about Konosuba's animation. The second season, on the other hand, was altered to properly exemplify the tone of the show, so that even just watching the characters move became funny, with their frequently off-model movements and their crazy exaggerated facial expressions. Not only does this help it stand out amongst a plethora of other comedies, it also shows the creator's great understanding of Konosuba's story and intent. Because of this, I found the second season of the show far superior to the first. Another great thing about the show, once again especially in the second season, is its use of music and the way other animation styles are sprinkled in. Quick, unexpected, yet necessary tonal shifts bring the whole experience together. Are the characters fighting? Do we want everything to seem far more dramatic than it has any right to be, or at least more dramatic than we'd expect it to be? Well, for this movement, we'll put in bold lines around the characters and animate the punch with an impressive level of detail. We'll also use camera angles and character profiles that work to bring home this drama. The music also echoes these changes in tone when they occur, sometimes going back and forth from intense to lighthearted in mere seconds. Thus, the show feels whole, with all of its elements working in unison, to the point where sometimes just the introduction of a certain musical piece would make me laugh. My point through all of this is that there's so much work that goes into good comedy. A lot of the time people have a tendency to view something as just funny and move on, like I said before, and I think we need to start seeing more analytical videos and really in-depth reviews about comedy. I'll admit that I'm likely not the person for that job, though as I improve in my writing and watch more comedy, I hope to tackle some of those ideas. I hope I tackled some of them in this video.